Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why customers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit Progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Your day moves fast. Your news should too. That's why there's a new and improved Wish TV app bringing you more local news, breaking alerts, live streaming, weather forecasts, radar, and Indiana sports all in one place. Customize your news feed to see the stories that matter most to you and get the information you need when you need it. Download the new and improved Wish TV app today on iOS or Android and take News 8 with you everywhere.
Music, dance, theater. It's time to take a seat on the aisle with Tom Alvarez. Hear from performers, producers, presenters, and creators who enrich our lives in the performing arts. Who's on stage? Here is Tom Alvarez to introduce you.
Hello, and welcome to On the Aisle with me, Tom Alvarez. My guest on today's episode is Susanne McAlister. Her accomplished career has spanned broadcasting, nonprofit leadership, corporate development, and investment banking. Join me now as I go on the aisle for a conversation with Susanne.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Good morning, Susanne. Welcome to my podcast.
Good morning, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, as you know, this program, I cover the performing arts, and so I'm often in a concert hall or a theater, and it's those places where I get my ideas about booking guests. And last time I saw you was at the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra, and you did a curtain call. And that was, for me, a sure example that you're still very much involved in this community. You've had a long career, and we'll get into all of that, including broadcasting, which is what we have in common. But let's start with that association that you have with the Indianapolis Symphony and the reason why you were on stage.
I'd love to start there, and I loved running into you, where I am not surprised to find you because you are all over town covering the arts. So I want to start by saying thank you to you for all that you do. But the reason I had my curtain call at the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra, I've been involved with the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra Association for a number of years. I was on a board several years ago, and they were doing a membership drive. So they asked me to come on stage and just give an overview of how the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra Association, an all-volunteer organization, supports the symphony. And as you and I both know, certainly volunteer organizations that support the arts are critical to getting the mission done, raising extra funds, and filling in where staff just simply can't do everything.
Mm-hmm. And so how long have you been involved with the symphony? What's your history with that?
I got involved with the symphony back in the early 2000s and was pleased to be able to serve on the board, as I mentioned earlier. And when I first joined, it was still called the Women's Committee. Mm-hmm. And when Charlene Barnett, certainly another name that many of your audience members have probably heard about, someone who's on the board of the symphony and very involved in the community, she asked me to bring the name up to more of what we're expecting of volunteer organizations. And we didn't want to just be a volunteer organization for women only. So my association goes back to when we changed the name. We talked with our members in the North, South, East, and West group, and we also have affiliates in Columbus, Indiana, as well as Wabash. And there really was a sense that it was time to change the name. So I was excited to be a part of the information gathering, interviewing the stakeholders. We came up with a long list of names, but the one that resonated with most people was the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra Association. So we have ISO and then an A at the end. And I'm happy to say that during that process, we were trying to come up with a tagline. And I said, well, maybe something like people with a passion for music. And the marketing director at the time said, I think we got one.
So who was the music director, and who was the CEO at the time of the Symphony?
It was
Or
Simon
executive director.
Kirkall.
I'm sorry?
Simon.
Of course, yeah.
Yes,
Simon
yes.
Kirkall.
So he was here for a number of years, and then Gary took over, Gary
Yes.
Giesling. And then James Johnson.
Okay, who was on the podium? Who was the artistic director back then?
Gosh, Tom.
Urbanski or
Urbanski.
pre-Urbanski?
It was pre-Urbanski.
Okay.
Yes,
yeah.
and we all know Jack Everly has been involved with the Pops series for a very long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was pre-Urbanski.
Yeah.
And you probably have a better memory of that than I do.
Well, I've been around for a while, and so I've been through lots of different regimes, if you will, or organizational change comes and goes, as you know. It's very fluid. Some stays a lot longer than others, but we have a history here at Indianapolis of having some extraordinary people at the helm of our arts organizations, haven't we?
Absolutely, and that is key to success. It's
Yeah.
key to artistic success. It's key to financial success. It's key to having the audience continue to come and listen and enjoy, whether it's a play or whether it's the symphony or some arts activity. You know, it really does start at the top. And one thing I remember about, going back a few years with the symphony, when the ISO performed in Washington, D.C. at the Kennedy Center, there were a number of us that went to Washington, D.C., and it was a fabulous performance, and they had their singers there as well. But it was an opportunity where Gary Giesling was there, Simon was there, and then the incoming director, president, CEO, James Johnson, was also there. So it was kind of a novel time.
I recall, and I'm sure you knew, Marianne Tobias. I remember how excited she was about that performance and attending, and it was quite a feather in the hat for the symphony.
It was, and in fact, Marianne sponsored a luncheon for musicians and for Indianapolis folks that went to DC. She was so proud, as you know, of the symphony and her being a musician herself, and then doing the program notes, which I love. When you can go in a little ahead of time, read Marianne's notes, you get a better sense of what the performance is all about and what the story is that they're trying to tell.
Those program notes went a long way in educating me, because I'm a critic, as you know, and I didn't study music, but I've always been around music, and but she taught me a lot about the repertoire. And she taught me a lot about, and I love the way she communicated. It was in language that anyone could understand. It wasn't musicians writing for musicians. And I think you'll agree, she made it very accessible, didn't she? She
really did. And I think overall, when you look at the arts, especially now perhaps, because the audiences have shrunk in some areas, but making it accessible, as you just said, is key. Whether it's understanding the program notes or having free days or free performances, allowing different audiences to share what music and the arts are all about, and breaking down those barriers and allowing a broader audience to enjoy it. It's life-changing.
Well, I'm sure because of your involvement with the association that you spent a lot of time with your colleagues and talking about new audiences, right?
Absolutely.
And how to promote the symphony and bring in new people and make it more attractive to those who haven't experienced, break down some of those stereotypes that it has about elitism and all that. Is that right?
Absolutely. And one of the goals of the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra Association is to help with that expansion of audience development. And key to that are the programs that are geared toward school-age children. And I believe it's about 30,000 school-age children participate in Symphony in Color, which is an art and music education awards type program, and it attracts 30,000 kids. They draw the pieces that are submitted, are judged, there are prizes, but it really is a fun way for kids to draw something, and then for the top winners, they get to see their art on display in the mezzanine at the Symphony. So it's a fun time for everyone, and building that audience with the kids, and of course their parents have to take them. So there's a little method to the madness there.
Yeah, and I presume you've been a longtime fan before you even got involved as a volunteer, right?
I have been a longtime fan of the Symphony. As I shared with you off, not on the podcast here, but my father actually played for the Indianapolis Symphony, and that was in the early 50s before he was married to my mom. And it was a time when it was not a full-time gig. There were only 13 weeks of performances. So he was a trumpet player and was identified as a child prodigy when he was 4. Wow. So it was just kind of natural for him to work into being at the Symphony, but he realized that at that time you couldn't make a living at it. But it was wonderful to grow up in a household where all kinds of music was played.
Yep.
And then hearing Dad practice on his trumpet, which could be a little irritating at times because when you do the drills, it's not like the refined performance that you get once the musicians are on stage. But I do now, especially as I look back on my upbringing, appreciate what my parents did.
Yeah.
And growing up in Muncie, the Symphony there had what was called matinee musicals. So that was their way of bringing in, I think it was 4th grade when we went. And it was just magical.
Well, of course, I also know that you also studied ballet and dance ballet at a young age.
I did. My siblings were more the musicians. I have 2 sisters that played the piano very well. I took piano lessons for about 4 months. My motivation was actually to get the fudge from the piano teacher at Christmas time because she always gave out fudge. So I asked my parents, I think it was in October.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd like to go to Mrs. McNamara's house and learn piano. But my heart really was with the ballet. I started taking ballet lessons in the 1st grade and continued dancing up until like my sophomore year in college.
Yeah. Okay. Well, as you know, I cover the arts, the performing arts in particular, and I love to invite people on this podcast. I love to talk to artists and designers, anybody in front of or behind the curtain, because I want to give people a broad view of what it takes for us to have the vital performing arts community we have. And in that light, I also like to bring other people there are all kinds of ways you can be involved in the arts. You can be a volunteer. You can be a philanthropist. You can be a contributor. You can be in broadcasting. And I love having broadcasters on, number one, because you and I share that history of broadcasting. And I'm going to get into that here in a minute because I think it's very important for broadcasters to have interest in supporting the arts because they're the ones who communicate what's going on in the community. And if it were not for broadcasters, and now it's getting there's fewer and fewer and fewer of those in the business who work for entities that support the arts. And so it's critical for me to bring in our spokespeople, and you certainly represent that. You were in broadcasting for 27 years?
22 and a half.
Okay. So let's talk about your history, and let's talk a bit first, though, about how you and I met. So fill us in.
I would love to. Well, 22 and a half years, the first 17 years of my television broadcast career, where I was a television host and executive producer, was with WTTV Channel 4. And I started in the Bloomington studio, which was the original studio of WTTV. In fact, it was on the founder's front yard, the studio was.
I didn't realize
Sarkis
that
Tarsia.
started in Bloomington?
It did.
Okay.
It did. And then during the Reagan years, when they changed the rules of having a studio in your city of license, because WTTV is actually licensed to Bloomington, as long as you had a signal grade coverage over your city of license, then you didn't have to maintain a studio. So I started my program in Bloomington, and then because of the change in those rules, they shut down, the owners at that time shut down the Bloomington studio, which was founded by Sarkis Tarzian. And then that's when I came to Indianapolis. It was 1989. So I shifted from taping a half hour Monday through Friday talk variety program to coming to Indianapolis, expanding the show to an hour. And that's when I had the good luck of meeting you, Tom, because you and Mike Byram and a number of other people produced the show, and your stamp was on it. You really added so much depth and variety of guests. And it was just fun how, that goes way back, but it formed a friendship that lasts today.
I drive, the station was on Bluff Road.
Correct.
And whenever I drive down Bluff Road, I look over there to that, empty property, and I reminisce about those days. It's just hard to believe that it was torn down. They didn't see any historic value in that. And even though the building wasn't that old when it was torn down, was it?
I don't know exactly how old it was, but having worked there for a number of years, it was getting pretty old.
Oh, I didn't really.
It was kind of a cinder block building, and there had been renovations along the way. But if I remember correctly, when WTTV and Fox combined, it made more sense to build a new building on the west side of Indianapolis.
Of course.
So there's a lot of rich history there, though, at WTTV with the programs. And as you know, when we were doing the talk show,
Susanne McAlister show.
The Susanne McAlister show. It started as Today in Indiana. Mm-hmm. We went from being mostly central Indiana to regional, and we really expanded our reach because of the signal that we had, and it was a pretty strong signal. But the thing that was so different back then, as you know, that was pre-internet. We were still on the national talk show circuit. People were wanting to tell us about their latest book or their project, or they were coming through town performing at Clues Hall, or maybe they were a special guest at the Symphony. So while we had to get our guests locally, we were also, again, on that national talk show circuit. So there were PR firms from California and Chicago and New York that actually would reach out to us because their clients would be going on the national talk show circuit, and Indianapolis was a common stop for them to make. So we met a lot of interesting people over the years, didn't we?
I'll tell you, I certainly can attest to that. I have, unfortunately, I only have a few photos, but one I treasure. It's a photo of you and me and Carol Channing together.
Yes.
And that was a really big deal. She was a really big star at the time. And I think probably... I can't remember the details. How did you and I meet? I don't remember. We had just out in the community, right? I don't know.
That's so interesting you asked that, Tom, because I know that we've known each other a long time and that you produced the show, but I don't remember if that was the first time our paths crossed.
Knew I had been at Channel 6 at one time.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure I pitched you why I was the right person for you, because my first gig at Channel 6 as a young 21-year-old was to be a gopher for the Joe for Jim Gerard, who had a daily talk show, and
I
he
was
was
on
the
that
Johnny
show, in
Carson
fact.
of Indianapolis.
Exactly.
Right?
I think that's how it was.
And that's where I learned that, what's old is new again, because as you know, I'm on Lifestyle Live, and it's the same thing.
Right. Well,
Lifestyle show.
it's fabulous. And, the old saying is there are no new
And the
ideas.
thing
They
I
just get
love,
recycled.
Suzanne, just as they did then, people still want local programming.
Absolutely, they do.
What's
it's
going on in my community? Yeah.
that is very important. And, going back to interviewing Carol Channing, and I remember that picture, and it was definitely in the late 80s and early 90s because my hair is just like blown out, like so big. That was a style back then.
Yeah, broadcasters, the women in those days had helmet hair.
We had helmet hair and we had big shoulder pads
That's
in our
right.
coats.
Are you sure? Wait a minute. Are you sure you didn't have curly hair? Well, because
Well, it was
was
a perm.
It was a dynasty. Those were the dynasty years of the broad shoulder.
Absolutely.
And, yeah, and I had a mustache. I remember that.
That's right.
But I recall I recall, Suzanne, that from the get-go you had this and you still do, you have this charisma, you have this on air. There are very, very few people, and I'm still in the business, I'm still very conscious. I've never stopped watching national programming, especially talk shows, because I've had a direct experience and now and I have on the show here for a long time, but I'm very aware of talent. And the talent that always rises above everybody else are those who just have a natural ability to be in front of that camera. And they do make it look effortless, and you're one of those people. Plus, you're easy on the eyes, of course. You were, and that kind of beauty is transcendent that you had. But it was also, you reflected a beautiful inside too. So you really do, and you still have a remarkable presence, a photogenic, telegenic, whatever you want to call it. So I recall that too. It was such a pleasure to work with you because you were such a pro.
Oh, Tom, thank you for those kind words.
And
That
coming
means a
from
lot.
Channel 6, that was like the gold standard, if you recall.
Absolutely.
The people, Howard Caldwell, and then later Clyde Lee and Dionne Willis, those folks, they could have been on national network if they had continued their careers, I believe.
Absolutely.
Any one of them. But you were right up there with the top talent.
Thank you. Well, I like you, feel that I have a natural curiosity. I want to learn about people. I want to know their story. I want to hear, their hardships and their joys. And if my parents were alive today, they would say that I was destined to go into television because they loved telling the story that when I was about 5 years old, they had a dinner party and the guests were in our small living room growing up in Muncie. And I brought this stool into the middle of the crowd. It was just a low stool. And I jumped on it and I started clapping my hands. And I told everyone, quiet, I'm going to give you a show now. And so who knows, we think about how do we end up where we end up. And sometimes it's that childhood zest.
And another joy as a producer, working with you at that time, I recall I really appreciated the fact that when I said you were a pro, you always did your homework. And, part of my job was to feed you the research that I'd done, bios and whatever I could that would help you prepare. And you were always prepared. You never phoned it in, ever. And I have worked with people since then, that eventually lost interest, and you could tell when people aren't doing their job and don't come prepared. They mispronounce people's names and little things, but you were really on top of that. It was very important. And why was that?
Thank you again for that nice compliment. I think part of it is I started my career in education. So education was really important to me. Fact finding was important. Pronunciations especially growing up, my dad always made sure that we were enunciating and pronouncing names correctly. So I think the root of that is part of my education. And then when I got my master's in counseling and educational psychology, I think that really helped and honed my interview skills, because it makes you not only listen to what a person is saying, but try to figure out what are they not saying, and to go there with a question that may uncover something that you wouldn't get if you just responded to the answer that you just heard. So I think that was just a drill, and also just a professional attitude that I had. I mean, it felt weird today coming in here because I just showed up. I didn't have to do any homework because you're talking to me about me. But I have to tell you, it seemed rather odd not to have done some studying before I came in and talked with you today, Tom.
And I've been immersed in Susanne McAlister for the past couple of days, all the materials that you sent me, much of which I already knew. So but no, I learned a lot from you about the listening part, and I've had to learn as a broadcaster how important it is to also, I like to think that I ask the right questions. And it's interesting that you talk about counseling, because I'm very transparent. I've had my share of therapy over the years, and I've had some wonderful therapists. And, I never second guessed the process, but I knew they had been trained in the art of interviewing.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
And so I think I've taken a page from all those folks, and, I learned a lot about how if you truly zone in and are present, that you can learn a lot about how what people are expressing and what it means. Being able to read the room, I think I've learned a lot.
Absolutely.
Right?
And I think that whole concept transcends to what our musicians do, what our artists do, what our performers of any kind do. They really have to zone in on their craft. They have to keep the noise away from them, and they have to just really be present. And through that, it's a transformation. It's one thing for us as interviewers to, be ourselves and have a conversation. But to me, for a performer to just go into that inner space and to bring out their talent in ways that makes us cry, makes us laugh, moves us, reminds us of something in our past, or it just is a contemplative moment. But to me, that is such a hard thing to accomplish.
Well, I'm still learning, doing this podcast is a dream come true in a way. I don't think I ever verbalized to anybody, even people I'm close to, that this was a secret dream, and here I am. But, I learned a lot from being around incredible colleagues all the years I've been around broadcasting. And even in those years when I didn't, like you, I reinvented myself and did other things. And I've always believed in the concept of transferable skills, haven't you?
Absolutely.
You certainly practiced it, right?
Well, going from education to broadcast television into investment banking, and now as a retired member of our society, being involved in a number of boards. I mean, there are so many skills that we learn along the way. And if we want to remain active, if we want to remain involved, then we can use those transferable skills.
Absolutely. And how do you feel about that? The idea of, we are in the so-called, what are they calling it these days? The seniors, the silver tsunami, not tsunami. What's the
Tsunami.
word? Tsunami. Yeah, the silver tsunami. And, many of us are children of the 60s. We're used to being innovative and trailblazers and, throwing the doors wide open, imagining. And, many of us are doing it the traditional way, but many of us are not. many of us have chosen to stay active in the community and not just spend time in Florida playing golf or whatever. What are your thoughts about for our senior listeners?
Well, you said a lot of key things, and with the baby boomer group, I think we have always, as a group, not as individuals, but as a group, really have been innovative. Maybe some of the Gen Zers or the younger generations might say that we've been a little bit too individualistic, but I think as a whole, we have given back and we continue to give back. But what we do in retirement is really a personal choice.
Sure.
And I think it's an extension of how we lived our lives. And I also feel that for me personally, I am a lifelong learner. And for me to not be involved would just be, oh gosh, I can't imagine. I can't imagine. But for somebody going to Florida and playing golf 5 or 6 days a week, that's their
All
thing
power
too.
to 'em, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I do feel when I am involved with my volunteer groups, and I think about how important volunteers are for especially the arts organizations, there are so many people that are going along in their retirement. I think there might be still some desire to want to do things. And my message would be for our senior listeners right now is if there is a void and if there is something in your life that you would like to fill up with some way of giving back, reach out and let these organizations know that you'd like to tap into their volunteer network. They would love that because the organizations can't reach out to everybody. So just like you, if we want something to happen, we have to initiate the action to make it happen.
So tell me about your other pursuits right now, because you have your fingers in many things, I'm sure.
Well, the board work, as I mentioned, is a big part of my life, which I very much enjoy. WFYI Public Media is one of the boards that I serve on currently. I was the president of the foundation, which was then rolled into the main operating board.
Didn't you also actually were employed by them at one
Yes,
time?
I was vice president for corporate development back in the early 2000s.
Under Lloyd?
Yes, Lloyd Wright.
Yes.
An advocate of the arts.
Oh, yeah.
No doubt. And in fact, I met Lloyd in the early 90s when he first came on board. So I've had a long-term relationship with public media. I've been a consultant and manager and it just, that pursuit of lifelong learning, that is one of their
Were you
pillars.
ever on the air with them?
Only for volunteer pitches.
Okay.
Yeah, but I never had a show on
Well, you could
WFI.
have. Yeah.
Well, you've just planted a seed there, Tom.
Well, you still could. I'm 78 and I've got a podcast.
Well, I'm
right?
not telling you how old I am.
Oh, okay.
At least not on the air.
Well, don't forget people have Google and AI.
Oh,
so
I know.
Nothing's hidden anymore.
No secrets. But I'm also so pleased to be a member of the Board of Trustees at Butler University.
Of course.
2 of my grandchildren through my late husband, Dan Spitzberg, graduated from Butler. And the grandson who just received his MBA, because I'm a member of the Board of Trustees, I was able to be on the podium in the cap and gown and present his diploma
Was that
to
just
him.
recently?
It was in May.
And if I may, I would like to offer my deepest condolences for your loss.
Thank
because
you.
I know that you suffered that loss just recently, right? So tell our audience about your late husband.
Oh gosh, Dan was just an amazing man. He was the epitome of giving back. And he wrote a book a couple years ago called In the Blink of an Eye, because Dan was an ophthalmologist by training, and his last job was chief medical officer for United Healthcare. And throughout his career, whether it was giving anonymously or giving to his temple or allowing people to work side by side with him, he gave up his time. He gave to numerous organizations that he really felt akin to. And I think that kind of attitude has really been passed along to his kids and grandkids. But we met in 2018. We got married at the height of COVID in May of 2020. And unfortunately, he passed away very unexpectedly in January. So I've
So
gone
still
through
very fresh.
Yeah. I'm in a period of reset and renewal and reflection, certainly, because grief, you mentioned tsunami earlier. I have equated grief as a wave, and sometimes it's a tsunami, sometimes it's more calm, and sometimes it's a little rocky. But for me, that analogy seems to capture
Are you
some of the
comfortable
modes.
talking about your grief?
Well, what would you like to know?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm a big fan of Anderson Cooper's podcast about grief. I don't know if you've heard it, but he's brought on some big names, but also just average people to talk about just grief. And yes, I've known my share of it, and of late, like again as a senior, I continue to lose people who I'm very close to. Mary Ann being one of them. I miss her so much, but also my mother and other relatives, and one of the things my mother told me, the hardest thing about aging is you begin to lose people. They drop off.
Right.
Even people you don't know, but people you grew up with, movie stars and, actors and musicians. And, you realize it forces you to look at your own immortality and come to terms with it. But when it happens to you, it's another story. Yeah.
Absolutely. When it hits so close to, to lose your husband, because, we were together in essence 24/7. And one day you're together planning a vacation.
The finality of it is what you can't wrap your
Yes.
arms around it, right?
Yes, you can't. I had lunch with a girlfriend and we were talking about grief. And I said something like, he was here 1 minute and then he was gone. And because I was there when he passed in Arizona in the hospice house, and I was there pretty much 24/7. And it's just like, whoa, that last breath. And there is no coming back.
Isn't that a phenomenon, that last breath? Because I was near my parents both when they took their final breaths, and it was exquisite in some ways. It was beautiful. It really made me, it gave me a sense of, I think you know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
It's a phenomenon, really.
When my mother passed away of a brain tumor when she was 53, and all six of us kids and my dad and my grandma, we were around her bed and we were praying. And I remember seeing her take her last breath. And what still stands out in my mind is that her last breath was in. I always thought of the last breath as being this big exhale. And to me, that was a symbol that she was breathing in the afterlife. And I know different people
Isn't
have
that
different.
Interesting. That's what happened to me too. That's
Wow.
Yeah. My first reaction, I don't know if you did this, is to look above, because I had seen enough documentaries and heard enough interviews about people who had, died clinically, and they experienced the
tunnel and the lights.
And their spirit rising and seeing everyone in the room from above.
Right. And you're absolutely right in terms of facing our own mortality.
Sure.
And at this point in my life, there's a lot more in the rear view mirror than there is ahead of me.
Yeah.
And I think that reality is also a motivator for me. What kind of connections can I make? What kind of impact can I make?
Was there a defining moment in this period of your grief when did something happen, or at what point did you say, I'm going to get up now and I'm going to keep moving? Was there a moment, or was it, a series of, what was it?
Well, we started this conversation with the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra and how I was on stage, and it was 4 different times. And that was very soon after Dan had passed.
I know.
And I almost just said, no, I'm not going to do this. They'll just have to find somebody else. But the professional side of me said, no, you need to get up and you need this to fulfill your own soul. And so that was a bit of a turning point from the perspective that I just dug deep down and got the energy, because grief is very tiring. And I got the motivation to go in front of the audience at the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra, Hilbert Circle Theater, and to talk to the group. And I think that gave me the confidence to know that it will be okay, but you never lose that grief. You kind of move through it, and it appears in different ways at different times.
Oh, yeah. When you least expect it, right?
Yes.
When you least expect some visual or some song or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's no litmus test, right? When it's, but so I know you well enough to know, because of your background in counseling and everything that you've been through, that you also are very aware of your emotions.
Very
you have
much
a
so.
lot of self-awareness. You know yourself pretty well, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And being on live television,
Oh, yeah.
You can't help sometimes but cry or laugh hysterically at something that's just happened. But being in tune with those emotions helps
Empathy.
a lot.
You learned empathy. That's what I learned through broadcasting.
Yes, a lot of empathy.
That comes along with really being interested in people's lives.
Right, right. It takes you out of yourself.
Do you still do this? I love to people watch because I love to, I'd love to know their story. I'd love to know where they came from, how they got here. Why did, I can read an expression and wonder what's going on in their life,
Right, right.
I spend a lot of time doing that. Do you do that?
Well, a pastime of mine at the airport, when you're waiting for the plane, or maybe it's been delayed or whatever, I will watch people come off the plane, and I have this little game in my mind. I think, oh, now what do they do for a living? And you see somebody in a Wall Street 3-piece suit. Oh, well, he's an investment banker. Or you see somebody else. Oh, they're an artist. And it's just my little way of people watching.
I've seen depictions in movies of scenes where a couple will do that. They'll, have a conversation and I wonder if that two couple over there, what's their story? And I've seen this used in plots several times in several movies of late.
That's good.
So yeah, but it's a great premise. Like, okay, so you're also involved with Newfields.
Yes.
Let's talk about Newfields.
Oh,
One of my
I would love to talk
favorite
about
places on
Newfields.
earth.
Well, let's see. When I moved to Indianapolis in 1989, it was the early 90s when I first started to discover Newfields. And I know that's part of
For
their...
those who aren't listening, who still don't know what Newfields is, tell them what that is.
Newfields is our amazing museum of art, as well as the 100-acre Virginia Fairbanks Park. We also have historic properties, including Lilly House. We also have the Miller House in Columbus. We're situated on 152 acres. And of course, the flagship is the Indianapolis Museum of Art itself. And so I've been so excited over the years because I was the president of the Alliance, and that was their volunteer group. And it gave me an opportunity to get a little background information. And over the years, as we have looked for new audiences, wanted to expand our offerings, utilize our campus in a way that had not been utilized before, I ultimately went on the board of directors. Tom Hyatt at the time had asked me to join the board. And the growth that we have seen when we branded the campus Newfields, we are still the Indianapolis Museum of Art. We're still the 100-acre park. But the campus branding gave us an opportunity to let the community know that we are more than a museum of art. And our extensive research showed, why weren't people coming to the museum? And a lot of it was I've never been to a museum. I'm intimidated. I can't bring my kids there. So we really made it an invitation by putting the name Newfields to join us and to discover us and to see what it's about. We did in parallel our work in terms of the museum and the fine art that we have, and we're still listed as one of the top 10 encyclopedic museums in the country. So we have an amazing collection, but we also have this amazing land. And under the directorship of Jonathan Wright, he has really made, no pun intended, the gardens really blossom. So I've just been very pleased to be a part of that, and to also see more and more community members come and take advantage of all that it has to offer.
Jonathan Wright is he's in charge of all the grounds, and he is a designer, is he not? He's a horticulturist, landscape architect.
Right.
Yeah, he's brilliant.
He
His
is.
talent,
He is brilliant.
You know,
brilliant.
just all one has to do is look at, he has this flair and imaginative. The landscaping there, when I go for those annual events now, they have a couple
winter
of
lights and harvest
October,
nights.
You know, the arrangements, are
Yes.
just
It's beauty. It's just
extraordinary.
beauty. Yes.
Yeah, the fall one. What's it called?
Harvest
The one?
nights.
Oh my gosh, it's so beautiful.
It is. All the pumpkins.
And then of course winter lights and all year round.
All year round. It's just, it's a joy.
And I haven't been to the greenhouse lately. Is it still alive and well?
Well, interesting you should ask. We are in the process. If you recall, the old greenhouse was a greenhouse and still is a greenhouse. But the goal, when Jonathan started, I think about 10 years ago, in front of the greenhouse, there was a parking lot. So the original owners of the home, that was part of their garden. It was the flower and vegetable garden. So just recently, we raised the funds necessary to dig up that parking lot, and Jonathan and his team are creating just an amazing oasis that will be in front of the existing greenhouse. So I think it's next year when it will launch.
I had not heard of that. That's wonderful.
Well, I would love to take you on a hard hat tour, because that's what they're doing now.
Okay.
Letting people know.
And of course, let's talk about the museum itself. And of course, there is a performing arts component, the Toby.
Right.
And again, as a reviewer, I've spent, over the years, I've spent a lot of time there. And recently I've been to performances there of, I think Indianapolis Ballet is one. And
Figaro
a
was
others.
there with the opera.
The opera. And of course, Heartland Film Festival. They do
Correct.
a lot of their programming there, right?
Yes, the Tobias Theater, formerly known as the Toby, is a great venue
And
to
again,
partner.
Marianne Tobias, she's her name
Benefactress.
is ubiquitous in the arts in this
Yeah,
town.
she really is.
She had a passion like you do for so many of the arts, including Newfields was one of her biggest passions.
Right, and you mentioned going to some performances at Newfields, and going back to your questions about grief. Part of my process of kind of rebalancing my life, I reached out to friends. They reached out to me. I went to the Figaro opera performance. I went to the Indy Ballet with the Sleeping Beauty, and then at both of which were at Newfields, and then Clues Hall had the performance of Gazelle with their symphony. So it was a way for me to immerse myself in the arts, and it's a great escape no matter where you are.
Very healing, yeah.
Very, very healing.
And that leads me to something else I want to talk to you about, because for me, given we talked about noise earlier, we talked about, we haven't yet, but, let's face it, we are at a time where there's a lot of turmoil and there's a lot of division, a lot of polarization, unfortunately. And you never know what you can and cannot talk about to people, of course, strangers, but even amongst your own group, if you will. There's so much division that one has to be careful not to engage in anything controversial around religion, politics, and so on and so forth. Having said that, I'm so grateful that I have platforms, and that my life is centered on the arts, because it's, for me, what a better way to escape than into, and I'm also a sports fan, and I'm not unusual, I'm not an anomaly, but I'm one of those arts fans who sees I see the connection between arts and sports. They're very similar in many ways. And one being that when you're in a theater or a concert hall or at a game, you don't know the politics of the person sitting next to you.
Exactly. Well
and it's
said.
Escapism, and both can be really inspiring. The stuff that's going on with the World Cup is just so incredibly theatrical.
Well said.
And so on and so forth. But,
It levels the playing field.
The arts is so important right now for all the reasons I mentioned, don't you think?
Oh, without a doubt. There's no doubt in my mind.
And for whatever you're feeling, it's a place where you can go and just escape.
Yes.
And even heal, maybe?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about that. And, when we talk about the arts and how important it is, when I look at the school systems, and some are better than others, but when funding has to be cut, it's always unfortunate to see the music and the arts usually at the top of that list. But when we look at the economic impact of the arts organizations, not only in our community, but throughout the country, the number of people that are employed in the arts, what the arts do for children in art education, in music education, really rounding out their sense of self in a way that is so different when those two elements are taken out of the curriculum.
I don't recall a time in the 50 years I've been covering the arts that, this message, it's not new. And people like you and me and others in this community, very powerful, influential people, have been pushing this message years and years and years. And yet sometimes it's like, it's still, it never ends. And I still don't get why people, even if they're bottom line people,
right,
why they do not see how important the arts are, even if it's even if they can just look at it as, from the standpoint of economics, right?
Right.
And yet it doesn't break through. And why is that? Arts education is part of it, of course.
Absolutely.
It's an education. It takes education.
Yes. And when you look at education in general, especially higher education, it seems as though, from what I have been reading and hearing, the pendulum is swinging back more toward the liberal arts, which gives a holistic view of education. And when employers are looking for people that have critical thinking skills, the ability to think on their feet, to form relationships, those kinds of soft skills, so to speak, are so important.
Yes.
And if you're just narrow in your focus of study, oftentimes you lose that, especially now kids on social media all the time. That's a whole nother podcast for you, Tom.
Oh, yeah. Well, I also am concerned about, the whole idea that there's this movement towards anti-intellectualism, and that education, I think it's important that not everybody is suited to go to college. And yes,
you're right.
We need people in the trades, and there's that. But why not include the arts, too, as part of their education to be well-rounded? Why compartmentalize that way,
Right.
And that doesn't help, that attitude.
And I think a podcast like yours, and earlier you talked about all the different ways that people can be involved in the arts. They may not be the singer or the performer, but they can be a stagehand. They can run a camera in a TV studio. They can be involved in marketing or PR. So the arts, I think sometimes we just get this narrow vision of a performer, but it's a wide tent
And I know that you sat at these board tables and you've had these important discussions with fellow board members and the arts organizations you serve. I know that you've had these discussions about how do we break down these stereotypes that people have, the idea that, how do we be more welcoming? How can we help people, who are intimidated, as you said, coming into the museum, about the way I dress? What happens if I embarrass myself when if I clap at the wrong time at a symphony? How should I behave? What's the protocol? A lot of people are afraid to participate because they haven't been made to feel welcome. And then there's the whole race thing. And that's getting better, fortunately, because now there are people sitting at the table
Absolutely.
who are participating, and we're beginning to see more and more performers on the stage who reflect the public. So there's some change going on, but it's still a tough message to get people past that. Is the arts, are they really for us?
That's a good point, and it's certainly a big question, no matter whether it's today or 10 years ago or 50
and I think
years
our
ago.
Symphonies are certainly the symphony, the symphony world, and they're trying to make the connection between pop culture.
Sure.
And, you've always had symphonic music people in your movies, all those soundtracks that you love. John Williams, that's a
he's
symphony
phenomenal.
orchestra. Yeah, so a lot, showing films and playing to films, and you know what I'm talking about. There's
cross population.
People trying to connect that pop culture derives from what you feel intimidated,
And I think going back to the importance of exposing kids to the arts, part of that exposure as a child begins to break down those barriers. They get a sense of what it's like to be an audience member or to find the joy in whatever medium they're participating in at the time, and not waiting till we're adults. So for me, it's all about getting those kids in early. And
I think you'll find this interesting because I'm sure you had a similar experience growing up. I did, I grew up blue collar in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I've told this many times. And, I went to Catholic schools, but we didn't have arts programming. It was it was reading, writing, and arithmetic. We were taught by a German order of teaching nuns, right? So, it's very practical, no nonsense. And we had, art classes, but not art activities, but there wasn't any kind of exposure. We didn't have field trips or anything like that. I didn't see a play till I was in high school. But my point is, what opened me up to the arts was the Ed Sullivan Show.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I got to see opera singers and ballet dancers and and then of course all the pop stuff, but that's where I saw, the
Beatles,
Mario Lanza and, Rudolph Nureyev and that was my exposure to the arts. So television, that's one of the things when I was a kid, it was magical. And I somehow, I don't know about you, but in the back of my mind, I stored that away. That's something I would love to do someday. I had no clue. It was out of my realm of experience.
Well, you never know.
Were you influenced by TV?
Oh, Ed Sullivan for sure, but also Lawrence Welk.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when the polka dancers came on, we would just get all of our toys out of the way and we would all just be doing the polka dance, and it was fun and enjoyable, and maybe that was my first inkling of ballet being something
when
that
did you first know that you wanted to be on TV?
Well, it goes back to that story I told you when I hopped up on the stool and said, listen to everybody, get quiet, I want to do a show. But I didn't really plan to go into television. I was a guest on the Today in Indiana program at WTTV on the day that the longtime host turned in her resignation.
Who is that?
Joni White was her name. And I was self-employed at the time, working on various development and event projects in the city of Bloomington. And I just blurted out to her, wow, you're leaving. I would like to be considered as one of your replacements. And so she said, well, talk to the station manager. And the next thing I know, I'm doing an audition tape. And then they called me, and I was thrilled beyond belief.
What was it like for you when you did that audition?
I was very fortunate that the person that I interviewed for the audition tape, Steve Hughes of the Hughes Food Group, St. Elmo's, he was my audition tape.
Your director?
No,
producer?
I actually talked with him. I had to interview him.
Oh,
And
I see.
Yes.
I see.
And
yeah.
he's
Put
so
on tape.
We were on tape. It was the audition, so it was fake. It wasn't like being on television. But he is so easy to talk with. And so I finished the tape. I was a little nervous. I felt like I had a out of body experience. And then
they placed you in the studio on a set? And
yes,
everything? Okay.
yes, that was the audition.
Oh, cool.
And so it was exhilarating and truly, as I just said, an out of body experience.
But did you somehow knew that you had found that you knew you belonged?
Yes, yes.
When that light went on?
Yes. And I have met so many interesting people over the years. Like, Gene Hackman, when he passed, I remember interviewing him at Hinkle Fieldhouse when they were filming Hoosiers and playing tennis with Arthur Ashe.
How did you find Steve Hackman?
Gene Hackman?
Gene Hackman. How did you find him?
He was very kind. He was very low key off camera, but his characters were not always over the top.
Not.
He was very, deliberate, quiet, but he was a person who wanted to be interviewed, but I could tell he wanted to get back on the set because he was a professional actor.
Oh, yeah.
But I found him to be extremely accommodating.
Having touched history as you did, and you talked about the folks who came when they came to Indianapolis. You were on the circuit, okay, and that's the way the Gerard shows. The Gerard show was anybody who was anybody. If they came through Indianapolis, they appeared on your show, and back then his show, and even he had a big budget at one time. He had a band. He had the whole 9 yards, and then budget cuts and all. But I came on the tail end, but they were still, I met so many incredible people of that time, and I go on and on and on. What are some of the others that stand out? Because I'm sure you also talk to, educators, and, I wouldn't be surprised if you talk to astronauts or, the whole wide range of celebrities, right?
Authors, musicians, politicians, comedians.
Presidents? Any presidents?
No presidents, but I did interview Evan By with Susan By, and she commented afterwards that she really appreciated being involved in the interview because it was the first time that anyone chose to include her. Okay. And we know how important her role was in supporting her husband as governor.
How about the mayors, all of our great mayors? I'm sure you talked to them.
I talked to several of the mayors,
Hudnett,
but with the political rules, you had to be careful because equal time. So that was not one of my large areas, but politicians.
How about authors? I'm sure you talked to authors.
I've talked to authors and Jackie Collins. I remember when Phil Donahue, I had an opportunity to talk with him. I think he had just finished a book, Marlo Thomas, his wife. It was just.
Were you ever starstruck?
Boy, that's a good question, Tom.
Anybody?
The answer is probably not. And I think that was why I could conduct an interview in a way that was just like how we are today. Friends sitting across the table, forget that the cameras are there, forget that the microphones are there, because I feel like if I was starstruck, I would probably have fumbled and mumbled and not been able to execute. So I probably on my way home, I'll think of somebody that I was starstruck by. But overall, I just treat everybody the same.
Yeah. Well, I think you learned, as I did, that it's a cliche, but you learn that they're just like us. They
That's
put
right.
on their pants the same way, and so on and so forth. And yet, I also could see, and I've also seen that one of the things that many people who I've been in contact with who are famous is that they hold back, and there's a vulnerability there. There's often a vulnerability, and if you can show vulnerability yourself,
Correct.
that it translates to them, and there's a level of trust, and that way people will open up more. Did you find that?
I did find that out, and with one exception, the category of, from my experience with talking to comedians, it was difficult, and maybe it was my line of questioning or whatever, but they always wanted to come back with a joke.
Sure.
They always stayed in that I'm a comedian, and probably part of that was just guarding them, as you said, being vulnerable and not wanting to expose who they really were when they weren't in their up on stage with the lights shining on them. But overall, I just felt that it was a wonderful way to meet a wide variety of people.
Sure.
And learn from them. It was a gift.
Have you ever considered writing a memoir?
I've had a few people ask me that question, and certainly after Dan wrote his book In the Blink of an Eye that I mentioned earlier, I was part of that process with him. He'd go through different ideas and chapters, and then he hired somebody, Peter Weiss, to help him fine-tune. It crossed my mind, but I also think, why would anyone want to read my book? There's a part of me that just thinks, well, it's not at the top of my list. Let's just say that.
Mm-hmm. So you've always loved telling other people's stories.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
What I would like to do in my retirement at this point, I've always been in front of the camera. My goal is to take up photography and nature photography. I find that being outside where it's quiet and discovering a new flower or a new tree or some quiet spot where there's outdoor sculpture is very calming, and it is something that I'd like to capture on camera.
Well,
and then
Newfields should hire you to do a book.
There you go. So if I did a book, it might be pictures and then maybe motivational sayings to go along with it. That's been something that's been in the back of my mind for a while.
Well, hopefully we will see that book in the near future, your next reinvention.
There you go.
Susanne McAlister, author, photographer. Right?
Then I could come on your podcast
Well,
and we can talk about that. See, we're painting our way forward, Tom.
Yeah.
That's important.
Yeah. Well, this has been a delight. It's always great to reconnect with friends from long ago. And, it's we share so much in common, but we still have things in common. That's what I love about friendships like ours. You can not only pick up where you left off, but, you have new things to talk about. We don't have to talk about the past only, right?
That's exactly right. And I think this has been delightful because when we have interacted in the past, it's either been about putting on a show or seeing you in a lobby of some performing arts venue, and to sit and have this chance to talk for, I think, an hour, Tom.
Oh, yeah.
It's been
It's been over an hour, but no one cares.
It's
I
fabulous.
certainly don't.
Thank
That's
you.
one of the beauties about this podcast. I mean, I can't go too long, but I, like back in the old days, like when we were in
Hard
broadcasting.
stop.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much again. And I look forward to seeing you on the aisle somewhere.
And thank you for being on the aisle and for doing what you do to promote the arts, Tom. Thank you.
Our thanks go out to our media sponsor, Urban Times. Urban Times is a monthly news magazine which serves as the official newsletter for 15 Indianapolis neighborhoods. offering news about development, arts and entertainment, and from the business community. Thank you for joining me on the aisle. Please subscribe to my podcast, and if you want to hear previous episodes, find them on the All Indiana Podcast Network or listen to them wherever you get your podcasts. This is Tom Alvarez.
Who will take center stage on the podcast next? Your seat on the aisle with Tom Alvarez awaits. Follow Tom on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and make sure to visit tomalvarez.studio. Watch Tom every other Thursday on Lifestyle Live on Wish TV, and make sure to listen every week here on the All Indiana Podcast Network.